Come, Holy Spirit, and guide us into all truth. You can find us on our website at spiritandtruth.tv, and we're going to continue talking about forgiveness. And sometimes we find it very difficult to forgive. Do you at times find it difficult to forgive? Well, sometimes it's because we don't have a great definition or understanding of what forgiveness is. As we start to develop a better understanding, sometimes forgiveness becomes a lot easier of a concept and also a lot easier of an action. We tend to have a lot of things tangled together with forgiveness that aren't really forgiveness and shouldn't be thought of in that same way. So forgiveness is, first off, I'm just going to go through a lot of practical definitions. Forgiveness is first acknowledging that someone owes you a very real debt. You can't forgive someone that hasn't harmed you, wronged you, or something else. So we're dealing with something that's been very grievous against us, and now you're going to give that to God. And so you're going to take that grievous event and give it to God and let Him become the judge. And so instead of carrying it yourself, that debt that's owed to you, now that person owes that debt to God directly. And what He does with it, we let Him do. He can forgive them. They can come to Him for that, whatever that looks like in their lives. But we're no longer a part of that with them. It's like releasing them from the entire storyline of your life in that moment of that harm. Now, you may still be in relationship with the person, so I don't mean from your whole storyline, but just that part where that thing happened. And so unforgiveness is one of the most harmful things to you as a person to hold. It actually doesn't hurt the other person at all. They're probably living their happy life and going about things, but it's eating away inside your soul. And so that's part of the reason we want to forgive people, is because we want to be whole. We want to be healthy, not only just because we've been forgiven so much, but also just because it brings so much possibility for more healing for us. So it is kind of a selfish act in a certain way. We can think of it that way, and that's okay. Some things that are really good for us, like being thankful, it does bring something. It is, anytime we step into the kingdom, it's going to bring health to us as well. So forgiveness is first and foremost an act of the will. It's not an act of the emotions. You can always choose to forgive someone. And actually, you start to realize how much power you have in this world when you start to realize how much you can do. I know there's people, I was even listening to some stories of people that had been in camps during World War II and had been terribly brutalized, and they were able to find some of their power back from those events by knowing that they were the ones that had the ability to still choose to forgive people. And so we're going to forgive people wholeheartedly, mind, will, and emotions as best we can. But sometimes the emotions or the mind, it lags behind. So we're going to actively choose to forgive someone with our will as a choice first before we feel like it. A lot of the times the feelings actually come second as we get healed up from the pain and the other things. But a lot of times it makes it very difficult to get healed up when we're still holding on to the unforgiveness. So forgiveness is giving a debt to God and saying the person and you no longer have an interaction over this event anymore, that they don't owe you anything. Forgiveness is not forgetting. So I know some people say, oh, once I forgive, I'm just going to forget, or God forgets, or any of those things. But really, for us as people, we're still probably going to have the memory, and that memory might still be very painful and unhealed, and we will have to have healing done to our soul. So just forgiving someone doesn't mean that you're instantly going to be healed. It just gives you now the possibility of entering into the healing journey. You may still need to work through all of the pain in that situation. Forgiveness may not make the pain go away, but it is that first step. So it gives God a lot more room to work in our lives towards healing then. Forgiveness does not release a person from their legal consequences or their actions. So there's times, let's just use the big example, somebody murdered somebody. Just because you've forgiven them for murdering a family member doesn't mean that they still don't have to go to court and stand before a judge and go to trial and all those kinds of things. In certain cases, you might even have to testify still. But it means that you're not the judge in the situation anymore. The judge is the judge, and God's the judge, and you are released from holding them to account to you. So that means that you won't be taking revenge. It means that you're not going to be holding on to things emotionally, and you're going to start allowing God to do a deep work in you to heal all of the pain around that event too. Forgiveness is also not reconciliation. So, we talk about this, that trust is usually what's broken when there's a forgiveness, when there's a need for forgiveness, and that trust is not automatically rebuilt because you've forgiven someone. In some cases, if you've been in an abusive relationship, you still need to move out or be away from that person, even though you've forgiven them. And so we do want to decouple the idea that forgiveness means reconciling. A lot of people think that if I forgive them, then I have to go be friends with them again, or I need to be in this situation that's going to put me in some harm or danger. And those kinds of things aren't what forgiveness is really looking at here. This is talking about, the regular wrongs of life would be things that you would stay in reconciliation. You're going to have to forgive your kids, your spouses, your parents. That's part of life and living inside of even normal, healthy relationships. But there are times when, you can't reconcile. Maybe someone's died even. You can't go back and reconcile with them, even if you forgive them. But that forgiveness will allow God to do a work in you. So I wanted to make sure that those were very clear. And for a lot of people, this brings a huge amount of freedom when they realize what forgiveness really is. It's an act of the will. So usually we make the statement, I choose to forgive. And it also is just not meaning that I need to go make a relationship or an ongoing relationship to show and prove that I forgave someone. A reconciliation means to come back into a relationship. So let's just talk a minute about what reconciling looks like, because it is so different from forgiveness. Forgiveness is not holding a judgment against somebody. Reconciling means to be back in relationship. And many times you forgive someone, and for many situations, and you don't need to let them know that you forgave them. You don't need to go back to that person and say, hey, I forgave you for all this, things you did or whatever happened. That doesn't always need to happen. In a lot of cases, that situation, like I said, the person might have died already. You might have moved on in life. It's just awkward at times if you go up to somebody and say, I forgive you for and you list a bunch of things and they don't even know that you were holding those against them. And so a lot of times forgiveness is just between you and God and getting things cleaned up. And then it gives the opportunity, if that relationship is still present, to enter into it more fully and to start building trust again in that relationship. And so really reconciling is more about rebuilding trust. And so we know that not all the time forgiveness will lead to reconciliations. Make sure that you are not putting yourself in a position of a reconciliation that's going to put you in a dangerous place. And that's something we always make sure when we're telling people about forgiveness is, there are times where, if someone is beating or abusing you or children, that's not a safe environment to be in. And those are times to seek outside help and counsel. Again, this is not counseling. So, those are beyond the scope. This is just about forgiveness. So first off, I'm just going to read out of Matthew. It just says, if your brother sins against you, go and tell him his fault between you and him alone. If he listens to you, you've gained your brother. But if he does not listen, take one or two others along with you, that every charge may be established by the evidence of 2 or 3 witnesses. If he refuses to listen to them, then we tell it to the church. And if he refuses to listen to even the church, then, we're going to treat him as an outsider. And so I'm just paraphrasing that last bit. But the idea is that we really want to keep forgiveness as, first off, like I said, sometimes you won't go to the person at all, and that's fine. But if it's been this large fault and there's been a known rift between you and you really feel like, you've released this, and then you can go and reconcile. And it's meaning don't bring people into this situation if you don't need to. And a lot of times we tend not to need to. We can go to the person and kind of talk things out. And so that's just how we go about reconciling. Very rarely, we shouldn't be seeking to have other people come in and judge someone either. We should be really looking to let them go. So I want you to pick a couple people who have really wronged you now that you have this new definition of forgiveness. And it's going to be an act of the will here. So we're going to say, I choose to forgive. So there may still be feelings of hurt afterwards. You may have to choose to forgive, more times as that healing process goes on over the next few weeks or month, as Jesus is still healing that event. We can talk about a trauma and abuse and all the events of life that happen later that need to be healed. Jesus definitely needs to come in and heal those too. But let's just start with, I choose to forgive, pick a name, and then we're going to say for what, and we need to be specific. So I choose to forgive for, and then let's pick another person, because I think this time we're just exercising our will now. So I choose to forgive for, and then the event. Okay, so again, forgiveness is something that we exercise regularly. I believe that Jesus said 70 times 7, and that meant a lot. It wasn't about the exact number, but we live in relationship, And we are constantly building trust and forgiving. And, we mess up, other people do. It's part of what we do as people. And so let's just continue to exercise our will here in forgiveness.